Hey everybody, off the Mike Sports Network, another edition of Brown's Thoughts. So, obviously, the big story of the NFL draft is Shedeur Sanders is still available heading into the third day of the NFL draft, rounds 4 through 7. But we need to talk about the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns have had a really good draft. They really have. I mean, they trade out of 2, they go to 5, they get Mason Graham, they get Carson Schlesinger, they get Quinshon Judkins, they get Harold Fannin, the tight end from Bowling Green. And then it comes to the end of the third round, and hey, Jalen Milroe gets picked. It's like, are the Browns really going to take a quarterback? I think it was like 92. I can't remember the number on the top of my head. It's really like the point is like what they did. And I listen. I was getting some text and I was getting speculation about Shedeur potentially being the pick there. So I got a little bit antsy. I went on to Twitter and I saw Mary Kate Cabot tweet out that they were going to take Dillon Gabriel. I almost didn't believe it because, and also no, Mary Kate Cabot's a great reporter, but she's occasionally gotten some things wrong. So I was like, okay, maybe this isn't totally true. So I waited for the announcement to be made, and it was official that Dillon Gabriel was selected in the third round by the Cleveland Browns over Shedeur Sanders, over Will Howard, over Riley Leonard, over Kyle McCord. What? Like, I like Dillon Gabriel, man. Like, I like him, man. Like, he's got like a little bit of those Tua qualities. He's very accurate. He's kind of on the smallish side, but he's a good precision passer. He can move a little bit, and he was very productive for at a lot of key stops. At UCF, he was productive. He was productive there. He was productive at Oklahoma, and then he helped lead an undefeated regular season at Oregon this year. So, on some level, it's like I could see that, but in the third round, and Shedeur Sanders is still there, and you have other needs. I listen. It reminds me, and if Browns fans, you bear with me, I think it might have been 2016 or 2017. And Hugh Jackson was the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, and they selected Cody Kessler out of USC, and around this same point, third round or so, third or fourth round, something, and people were looking at it like, well, Cody Kessler, like, yeah, he went to USC, but he wasn't that great. And Hugh Jackson said, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." And Cody Kessler played some games in the NFL. I've actually, gotten to know Cody a little bit. Cody's a good guy, but he wasn't a great NFL quarterback. And that's what I think this really is with, Dillon Gabriel. I think, like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he ends up like he's going to have a chance to potentially start, but it's like that's not the greatest indication in the world if Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett can't beat out this guy. And maybe they just wanted to throw somebody in that room that they knew, hey, wasn't going to be a problem and was going to, kind of be there and like didn't want to. But it also seems like maybe Jalen Milroe was their guy because of obviously the connection to Tommy Reese. And, they kind of panicked and they took the next guy really in their eyes that kind of met their need or, met like what fit what they wanted to do as an offense. But at the same time, like, it just feels really unnecessary and it feels like a reach. And, I hope maybe that it turns into something that actually matters. But Andrew Berry notoriously has, flamed on third round picks in his career. Anthony Schwartz comes to mind. There's been some other names but Anthony Schwartz is one of the big names that they whiffed on. And it hasn't been a great track record at this point. So it's almost like, and I was kind of speculating on this when they made the trade, especially getting that extra first round pick from Jacksonville, that, they are effectively punting on the 25 season and, basically saying, fuck it. Let's just, see what we have here. If we're terrible, we're terrible for middle of the road. And we think that Jacksonville is going to be bad. And, it's going to be a QB rich draft. You got Drew Aller, you got Kate Klubnik, you've got maybe Arch Manning, Carson Beck. I could keep going on and on and on about potential options at the quarterback position coming into the 26 NFL draft. And so maybe they're punting on it, but still, this is not a good use of a third round pick. And listen, I like the player. I like the kid. I think the intangibles are there for sure. It's just, it feels way too soon. And especially considering, listen, I was gonna be fine if they would have taken Shedeur Sanders. I understand that there would have been, but the optics of this is just bizarre. Listen, Xavier Watts was still on the board, and you might have needed a safety. You know, I lost track of the wide receivers that are available. Were there not any good wide receivers? They still need offensive line help. They didn't want to reach for an offensive lineman, but you reach for a quarterback who's undersized, very talented, very productive in the college game. Like I said, led a 13-0 regular season with the Oregon Ducks this past season, but this was a strange draft. And it's just like for the most part, the Browns did a really good job. Like I said, they addressed a lot of needs. They picked a lot of talented players. And I thought once they got past Harold Fannin and they took the tight end there at that point, I was like, maybe they're not going to take a quarterback this year. And I would have been fine with that. But then you use a third round pick on a guy who really probably you could have got on Saturday in rounds 4 through 7, and you overdo it. And everybody's losing their collective minds. Man, maybe Dillon Gabriel proves this wrong, and maybe he can win some games. But this almost feels like, hey, they are just punting, and they didn't have a good enough option in their brain, which is bizarre to me. But this also shows you that Andrew Berry in the third round, and mostly when it comes to drafting, just doesn't really know what's going on here. So it's just like I almost want to give it the benefit of the doubt because of how good they were, but this almost kind of undoes a lot of the goodwill that was built up in the previous 4 or 5 picks that have been made prior to this one at the back half of the third round. And hey, Shedeur Sanders is still on the board. That's the big story. Clearly they weren't interested in the guy. And clearly a lot of NFL teams aren't interested in the guy. So before everybody, obviously, Dillon Gabriel, we're not going to, it's Dillon Gabriel, Dillon Gabriel was productive, but Shedeur Sanders is a better pro prospect. Come on. What are we doing? It's obviously a personality thing. Something didn't gel with some of these teams, including the Browns, and they weren't interested in them. And I'm convinced that Jalen Milroe was a guy that they were really genuinely interested in taking. And maybe that's the guy that they were going to take, but he wasn't there. So they had to figure out another way to shift it and figure out what they wanted to do with their board. And, hey, you took a guy off, what was the number 1 team in college football going into the college football playoff, and he was the quarterback of that team. But yeah, it didn't feel like this was the move. And it's like I said, I'm trying to talk, as you guys can't tell, I'm trying to talk myself into this and it being, one of those moves where you're like, oh, okay, yeah, it kind of, but, and then you look at it and you're just like, with some of the other quarterbacks on the board and you piece it back and there's some other players on the board and you pass all that up. It's bizarre. It's really bizarre. Anyway, thanks so much for watching this edition of Browns Thoughts. We'll have a overview of the whole draft coming on Saturday. Also, Cavs playing bright and early here on the West Coast, 1 p.m. Eastern, an early matinee for you people in the East Coast. Go Cavs. And yeah, thanks so much. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.